Over the next week or so, I plan on doing a series of one from every team videos. I have a ton of ideas, but feel free to leave some if you have any down below in the comments. And since we are about a quarter of a way into the season already, which is insane, I feel like this year is just flying by, I figured I would start out the week of one from every team videos just by giving my general thoughts on every team at the quarter mark of the season. These videos tend to run pretty long, so let's not waste any more time. Going in alphabetical order, starting off with the Anaheim Ducks, who are the absolute worst team in the NHL. Standings wise, when you dive deep and look at their numbers as well, they are 22 games into the season and they only have one regulation win, which is insane. Their special teams suck, they struggle to score, they can't keep the puck out of their net, they don't get good goaltending. Nothing really good going on with the Ducks this year, except for a couple of bright spots, which one is Troy Terry proving that last season was not a fluke. Trevor Zegras also looks great in year 2. He definitely has not suffered a sophomore slump, so those are some bright spots, but other than that, I feel like Ducks fans are probably already thinking about Connor Bedard. The Arizona Coyotes, a team that everybody thought would probably be in the situation Anaheim is in right now, but Arizona has actually not been abysmal. They didn't just roll over this season, they're competitive on most nights. Karel Vejmelka is having an unbelievable year, and it's not like he's just looking good because he faces a ton of shots and gets shelled every single night. I believe he's one of the league leaders currently, or he's like top 10 in goals saved above expected. He's having an amazing year. The Boston Bruins, I mean, what do I really have to say here? The numbers speak for themselves. This team is a wagon. They're legit Stanley Cup contenders, and it's crazy because heading into the season, this is the team that everybody, including myself, figured would be the team to fall out of the playoffs if there was going to be a team to fall out in the Atlantic Division. Obviously, that has been far from the case. The Bruins could literally lose their next 10 games in a row in regulation, and they'd still be 2 games over 500, which is hilarious considering they've only played 21 games. David Pastrnak has been unbelievable, off to the best start of his career, and he's a UFA at the end of the season, so he's having this career year at a perfect time. You have to imagine he's going to be in for a contract that has an AAV probably above 11 million if he keeps up scoring at this pace. Next up, we have the Buffalo Sabres, kind of a tale of 2 seasons for them already. They started off hot, and then over the past couple of weeks, they've really came back down to earth and have not been good, which really sucks because this has now happened to them for like 4 consecutive seasons where they start off hot, give fans so much hope and optimism, and then completely fall off in the month of November. Certainly still some bright spots though. I mean, Tage Thompson has been an absolute monster this season. There was so much talk about that contract extension that the Sabres gave him in the offseason, how it was way too much for a guy who only had 1 good season, but now it's looking like a smart thing that the Sabres signed him to that extension in the offseason, because if they waited to do that after this season, they probably would have had to give him more. And can't forget, Rasmus Dahlin has finally had that massive breakthrough season that we all knew he was capable of having, and it seems like now he's really solidified himself as one of the best defensemen in the league. The Calgary Flames have still yet to find their stride. They've now lost 3 games in a row. Just a really mediocre first quarter of the season for them. Jonathan Huberdeau obviously is the big story there. He's not been able to find his game really as a member of the Flames just yet. He's got just 10 points in 18 games, and if he keeps up scoring at that pace, that'll be the lowest points per game he's had in a season since he was a sophomore. They're currently on the outside looking in terms of the playoff race. I definitely do still have faith that they will figure it out, and at the very least to make the playoffs. I think there's just way too much talent on this roster, and they're way too well of a coached team not to, but so far they've definitely been one of the more disappointing teams in the league in my opinion. The Carolina Hurricanes, I would say they've had an okay first quarter of a season. Obviously 11-6-5 is a solid record, but this is a team that had really high expectations coming into the season. They were actually my President's Trophy pick, and I don't really feel too great about that pick at this point in the season. They aren't getting the same level of elite goaltending they got last season from Freddie Anderson, and the depth scoring really hasn't been there. They only have 4 players on the roster that have double digits in points. Those are Burns, Svechnikov, Aho, and Natchez, so I think that's a little bit of a concern. The Chicago Blackhawks didn't look bad out of the gate. They actually started pretty well, but they're currently on a 7-game losing streak, and right now are kind of where everyone expected they would be heading into the season, and that is a bottom 3 team in the league. I feel like when it comes to Chicago, we're all just kind of waiting to see what happens with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, given how they're playing right now, where the team is at. I think it's really unlikely that both of these guys finish the season as a member of the Blackhawks. Next up, we have the Avalanche. I definitely feel like they're going to be pretty happy with their first quarter of the season. They're 12-6-1, 8-2 in their last 10, and that's with their captain Gabriel Landeskog not playing a single game just yet. Also, the early returns on Alexander Georgiev as a starting goaltender look great. He's actually been one of the better goaltenders in the league so far this season. This is a team that just knows how to win. They look fantastic. The Columbus Blue Jackets, can't imagine this is what they expected their first season with Johnny Gaudreau to look like. They currently have the second worst record in the league, only have more points than the Ducks. I know this is a team that didn't have insane expectations coming into the year, but when you go out and you get a big name free agent like Johnny Gaudreau, and when you're a team that spends pretty much to the salary cap like Columbus did heading into this season, I feel like you definitely expect a little bit more, but also on the other hand, they've had some really bad injury luck as well. The Dallas Stars, a team that I was certainly wrong about heading into the season. I didn't even have them making the playoffs, but overall, they look great. Jake Ottinger picked up where he left off in the playoffs. He's been really solid. Jason Robertson has taken yet another step. The only player in the NHL with more points than him, Connor McDavid. Jason Robertson has solidified himself as one of the absolute best players in the league. I feel like this is a team that just has a ton of underrated guys. Like even Jason Robertson, I don't think he's getting enough credit for how good he's been this season. Same goes for Rope Hintz, and Miro Heiskanen's a guy that I feel like is always overlooked because he doesn't, put up the same kind of offensive numbers as Cale Makar for an example. But this is a really good team and definitely one that I think everybody should take seriously as a legit threat to come out of the Western Conference this year. Moving on now to the Red Wings. I won't lie, it's been very difficult to kind of keep my expectations and keep my excitement in check about the Red Wings start to the season. November 28th, and they're in a divisional playoff spot. It's really exciting, but I'm going to keep going back to this. Their schedule up until this point has been very soft. I feel like they've had one of the easiest schedules to start the season. It's good that they took advantage of that, but I'm really interested to see how they play in December because they're going to be put through the gauntlet here soon. Their schedule gets really tough. Overall, though, really happy with the start of the season. A lot of Steve Yzerman's offseason additions look great. Olli Mata, I feel like, deserves a lot of credit for kind of the resurgence we've seen in Philip Hronik's game. Obviously, Dominic Kubalik, one of the better value signings of the offseason. Perron looks great. Ville Husso has been unreal. I'm not going to start talking or thinking about the playoffs, though, until they can prove that they can compete with the best of the best in the league, the best of the best in their own division, and they're definitely going to get an opportunity to do that here in December. The Edmonton Oilers, 11-10 currently. They are in a playoff spot, but that's kind of because the Western Conference isn't the strongest. I would say the first quarter of the season for the Oilers has definitely been disappointing. 5-on-5, this is not a great team. They rely on their special teams a ton, their power play specifically, to do a lot of their damage offensively. I think the Evander Kane injury has really put a damper on their season, and obviously Jack Campbell has been a non-option, an .875 save percentage through 12 games. That just can't happen. You need better goaltending than that. Luckily for the Oilers, though, Stuart Skinner has been really strong when he's gotten the nod. If not for him, this season could look a lot different right now. We are now in year 8 of Draisaitl, year 7 of McDavid, something like that, which is kind of crazy to think about, but still the Oilers don't look like a legit Stanley Cup threat with those two guys on the roster, and I would say that's pretty concerning. The Florida Panthers, currently outside looking in terms of the playoff race. Last year's President's Trophy winners, can't imagine they're too happy with their start to the season. I feel like they've been really inconsistent, not like even from game to game or week to week, but like in the course of a game, I feel like they'll be really good one period, then completely fall apart in the next. They're also in a pretty insane cap crunch right now. Anthony Duclair is supposed to be activated from the injured reserve here soon, and they can't really do that unless they move Duclair or move somebody else to free up space, so I'm interested to see what they do. They got some tough decisions to make. The Los Angeles Kings, fine start to the season for them. They're currently 12-9-3, occupy the 3rd spot in the Pacific Division. Kevin Fiala, that offseason addition, has looked great. He's leading them in points with 22 in 24 games. Gabriel Velarde and Kaliev have also taken big steps in year 2, which is really nice to see. The one concerning thing, though, definitely has to be the goaltending. I mean, Jonathan Quick bounced back a little bit last season, but now he's back to having a sub-900 save percentage, and Cal Peterson hasn't been great either, so that's definitely a concern for the Kings. The Minnesota Wild are up next, and results-wise, I would say it's been a mediocre start to the season for them. They're currently not occupying a playoff spot, but there definitely is a lot to like. I mean, Kaprizov is doing Kaprizov things. Matthew Boldy having a big sophomore year. Kalen Addison looks great, and after his nightmare of a start to the season, Fleury has kind of got back to form a little bit. His save percentage is above 900, which may not seem amazing, but considering the fact that he was lit up and his numbers were just disastrous after the first couple of games, it wasn't an easy task to get the numbers where they are now. The Montreal Canadiens, I would say they're one of the more surprising teams to start out this season. They weren't expected to do much at all, and here we are towards the end of November, and they're 2 games over 500, only 2 points out of a wildcard spot. And results aside, there's a lot to like in terms of the progression of their younger players. Nick Suzuki's playing the best hockey of his career. Cole Caulfield is looking great and producing well, and Kirby Dach, that trade is looking great. Putting those 3 together looks like a genius move by Marty St. Louis. They're so fun to watch, and they're putting up solid numbers as well. Also, I feel like Caden Gooley has been one of the more underrated rookies in the league this season. 20-year-old defenseman logging over 20 minutes, not far off from being a half point per game player, so lots to like from him as well. The Nashville Predators, as somebody who predicted them to make the playoffs, I'm definitely pretty underwhelmed with their first quarter of the season. This team just looks really, really average, and like there's nothing special to their game at all, and I feel like that's kind of been the case for the past couple of years, but the results were just propped up because UC Juuse Saros was so unbelievable, and so far this season, Saros isn't playing at the level that we've gotten used to seeing from him the past couple of years. If they want to have any chance of getting into a divisional playoff spot, or even really in a wildcard spot, I feel like we need to see Saros get back to playing at that Vezina level. The New Jersey Devils, I mean, what can I say about this team at this point that hasn't been said already? Made an entire video on them early on in the season, and they haven't slowed down since then. 18-4, which is unbelievable. The Toronto Maple Leafs obviously snapped their big winning streak the other day, but then since that loss, they've rattled off 2 more wins in a row. This team is legit. Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes are superstars in this league. If you don't believe in the Devils at this point, I honestly don't know what's going to make you believe in them. Next up, we have the New York Islanders, who are having a massive bounce back after a really rough, disappointing season last year. They are 15-8, 30 points, good for second in the Metro, only behind the Devils. Ilya Sorokin, I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for just how good he is. League leader in goals saved above expected at this point. He's been a monster, and for a team that played such a tight defensive system under Barry Trotz for so many years, they're kind of showing what they can do offensively now. They got 10 guys currently with double digits in points, so they got to be really happy with how their season's going. The New York Rangers, based off of the expectations that a lot of people had for them heading into the season, myself included when I did that tier list video ranking every team heading into the year, I had them as Stanley Cup contenders. I think I only had like 4 or 5 teams in that tier. The Rangers were one of them, and they're currently outside looking in terms of the playoff race. They're 1 point behind the Penguins for that second wildcard spot. I feel the same way about the Rangers though as I do the Calgary Flames. Like, I don't think there's a really good chance that they miss the playoffs. They're going to turn this around, and it's not like they're in a terrible spot. Like I said, they're only 1 point behind the Penguins for that second wildcard spot. Win a couple games in a row and they're right back in the playoffs. The Ottawa Senators, rough first quarter of the season for them. They're currently 4th from the bottom in the league, just 17 points in 21 games. And there was actually some expectations tied to this team heading into the season because of the additions like Alex DeBrincat and Claude Giroux. I feel like people may have jumped the gun a little bit though when it comes to the Ottawa Senators. I feel like this is a team that still definitely has a ways to go in their rebuild, and obviously losing your number 1 center in Josh Norris to injury doesn't help either. The Philadelphia Flyers are up next, another team where it's kind of been like a tale of 2 seasons. They started well, kind of surprised a lot of people because this is a team that everybody expected to be one of the worst in the league, and now they've lost 10 games in a row and they're right about where everyone expected them to be. When you have John Tortorella as the head coach, you're going to have a hardworking team, but at some point the fact that they're outmatched every single night when it comes to just skill on each team's roster, it was going to catch up to them, and it has. The Pittsburgh Penguins, after going through a pretty bad rough spot there early on in the season, they've kind of figured things out. 7-2-1 in their last 10 games, occupying the second wildcard spot, and at age 35, Sidney Crosby is tied for the league lead in even strength points with Erik Karlsson. They both have 24, even though Crosby is, Sidney Crosby's a household name, obviously got a ton of attention throughout his career, but I feel like we're not really talking about him enough this season because he's still one of the best players in the league. The San Jose Sharks having the kind of season that everybody expected them to have. This isn't a good team, only 7 wins through 24 games. However, Erik Karlsson's resurgence and him getting back to playing at such an elite level has actually made them watchable, which is good. But other than Erik Karlsson and his dominance, not really a whole lot to write home about when it comes to the San Jose Sharks. Next up, we have the Seattle Kraken, one of the more surprising teams to start out this season. They're currently 2nd in the Pacific, 8-1-1 in their last 10. It's night and day the difference from last season to this season when it comes to the Seattle Kraken. The Burakovsky signing has looked great. He's a point per game so far. Matt Beniers, probably the Calder front runner at this point. It's either him or Logan Thompson. Beniers has 18 points in 21 games. Although they aren't getting lights out goaltending, it's been much better than last season. It would have been hard to get any worse. Martin Jones' career resurgence has been a big help for the Seattle Kraken. Still don't know what's going on with Philip Grubauer. He's once again kind of been a non-option this season, which is not a good sign considering the contract he's on, but when it comes to a team like the Kraken, just in their second season, already seeing so much improvement, I feel like it's good to just focus on the bright side, and the bright side is they're one of the better teams in the Western Conference right now. The St. Louis Blues have really turned their season around after a miserable start. They're 8-2 in their last 10, find themselves occupying the second wildcard spot. The way they've been playing lately, that's the team I expected to see this year. That's the team that I predicted to finish first in the Central. They got a lot of depth up front. The blue line has definitely looked shaky at times, but with the way their goaltending has been playing over the past 10 games, that's kind of masked that problem. So overall, I think the St. Louis Blues are in a good position and heading in a really good direction. The Tampa Bay Lightning just kind of coasting along, doing their thing. We all know they're going to make the playoffs. They're currently occupying the first wildcard spot. I don't think this is a team that's going to really overexert themselves in the regular season or try everything in their capabilities, win the President's Trophy or something like that. I kind of get the vibe that Tampa doesn't really care where they finish in the regular season as long as they're in the playoffs. And then once the playoffs hit, it, then that's when they really turn it on. The Toronto Maple Leafs, after a pretty concerning start to the season, they've really turned things around. They've looked great over their past 10 games. Matt Murray, since coming back from injury, looks fantastic. His overall numbers on the season, a .921 save percentage with 4 wins in 6 games. Leafs got to be pretty happy about that. Mitch Marner and John Tavares both look fantastic. Marner's on like a bazillion game point streak or something like that. He's been a beast. The Vancouver Canucks, winners of 3 straight games, and don't look now, but they are only 1 point out of that second wildcard spot in the Western Conference, which is pretty crazy considering how Vancouver started their season. We were all kind of wondering what move the Canucks were going to make. Were they going to fire Bruce Boudreau? Were they going to make a big trade? And they didn't do nothing, and so far that seems like it was a good decision because they've really turned things around. Next up we have Vegas. Although they've slowed down a little bit in their previous 10 games and have lost 2 in a row, still in a great spot, 3rd place overall in the league with 33 points in 23 games. Obviously Logan Thompson has been a massive story. Him and Matty Beniers, like I said, gotta be the 2 front runners for the Calder at this point, and there's even some talk about Logan Thompson getting some Vezina consideration. I saw he was like top 5 in the NHL's Vezina trophy rankings right now, and up front they're getting contributions all through the lineup. This is a really deep team led by Jack Eichel, who is all the way back, which is really nice to see. The Washington Capitals, not a good start to the season for them. 9-11-3, 21 points, 4 points back of Pittsburgh for that second wildcard spot. And early on in the season, in a video I made, I think I said that I still feel like Washington is going to make the playoffs. Now I kind of feel differently. Like, I wouldn't be all that surprised if they don't at this point. This team just doesn't look good, and obviously they got a lot of injuries to key players like Backstrom and Tom Wilson. Those are 2 top line forwards. But even with those guys out of the lineup, I don't think anybody expected Washington to be this bad and be in this position here late in November. And now finally finishing out the video with the Winnipeg Jets, a team that has had a great first quarter of the season. They're 4th in the Western Conference, 7-3 in their last 10. They've been really consistent all season long so far, and after having a bit of a down year last season for his standards, Connor Hellebuyck seems to be all the way back. If the season ended today, this is a guy that may very well win the Vezina trophy. When you get that kind of goaltending and you have as much talent up front in your top 6 as the Winnipeg Jets have, you're likely going to win more games than you lose, and that's exactly been the case so far this season for the Jets. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those are my thoughts on every single NHL team through the first quarter of the season. Like I said at the beginning, expect a bunch more one from every team videos throughout the week. If you have any suggestions on things you want to see, be sure to let me know down below in the comments. I'm always open to hearing your guys' ideas. And while you're down there, if you could, please be sure to drop a like on the video. That is the best way to show your support. And last but not least, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.